Birmingham Police intercepted a massive cocaine shipment on a quiet residential street, leaving hardened detectives in disbelief at the scale of what they had uncovered. But 47 seconds after spotting the suspicious exchange between three men from different corners of the country, officers moved in with military precision, seizing over 100 kilograms of pure cocaine worth more than £10 million, one of the largest drug busts in British history. The date was April 10, 2024. A Wednesday like any other in Erdington, a northern suburb of Birmingham. Residents went about their daily routines, walking dogs, collecting children from school, and returning home from work, none of them aware that their ordinary neighbourhood was about to become the stage for one of the most significant drug busts in United Kingdom history. Birmingham, England's second-largest city, has long struggled with its share of challenges. The once proud industrial centre had weathered economic downturns and social changes over decades. Like many major urban centres, Birmingham had seen the devastating effects of drug trade on its communities. Areas like Erdington had experienced growing problems with narcotics distribution, violence, and organised crime. Detective Inspector Nathan Rafferty had spent 15 years with West Midlands Police, the last 5 with the Regional Organised Crime Unit, known as ROCU. ROCU operates as a specialised force combining officers from Staffordshire, West Midlands, West Mercia, and Warwickshire police forces. Their mission: to dismantle the most dangerous criminal networks operating across central England. The cocaine trade has exploded in recent years, Rafferty explained in a later interview. What we are seeing now is unprecedented volumes moving through the country. The purity levels are higher, the quantities are larger, and the networks more sophisticated. Indeed, cocaine importation into the United Kingdom had reached record levels. The National Crime Agency estimated that Britons consumed approximately 40 tons of cocaine annually, a market worth nearly £4 billion. Global production had surged, particularly in Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, flooding European markets with the dangerous white powder. Birmingham had become a key distribution hub. Its central location, extensive transportation networks, and diverse population made it ideal for drug traffickers looking to move product throughout the country. County lines operations, where urban dealers established distribution networks in smaller towns and rural areas, often originated from Birmingham, with hundreds of such operations identified by authorities. Erdington itself had been struggling. Once a thriving shopping district, its high street had seen better days. Local residents reported increasing concerns about drug use, antisocial behaviour, and crime. Police data showed that crime in the area cost taxpayers an estimated £7 million in 2024 alone. Community members described feeling unsafe in certain areas, particularly after dark. "People are scared to shop here," said one local business owner. "We see drug dealing happening openly sometimes. It affects everyone's quality of life." Against this backdrop, Detective Inspector Rafferty and his team at ROCU had been monitoring intelligence about a major cocaine network operating across the United Kingdom. For months, they had been piecing together fragments of information, surveillance reports, and confidential informant tips suggesting that a sophisticated operation was moving significant quantities of cocaine through the West Midlands. "We knew something big was happening," said Rafferty. "The intelligence pointed to a network that was operating at a different level than what we typically see. This was not street-level dealing. This was wholesale distribution of high-purity cocaine worth millions." The team had identified several vehicles of interest and patterns of movement that suggested drug distribution activity. They had narrowed their focus to several key individuals who appeared to be coordinating shipments across different regions of the country. What made this network particularly concerning was its apparent sophistication. The suspects seemed aware of traditional police tactics, using multiple vehicles, avoiding digital communications, and meeting in ordinary residential areas rather than known crime hotspots. They operated with a level of professionalism that indicated connections to international suppliers. "These were not amateurs," noted Sergeant Kimberly Walsh, who would play a key role in the operation. "They understood counter-surveillance. They switched vehicles regularly. They used cash only. They kept a low profile, all the hallmarks of a top-tier organization." The stakes were extraordinarily high. If this network was indeed moving the quantities of cocaine that intelligence suggested, they were causing immense harm to communities across the United Kingdom. Addiction, violence, exploitation of vulnerable people, and the corruption of legitimate businesses all followed in the wake of such operations. For Detective Inspector Rafferty and his team, bringing down this network had become a top priority, but they needed more than suspicions and fragments of intelligence. They needed concrete evidence, and they needed to catch the suspects in the act of handling the drugs. Timing is everything in these operations, Rafferty would later explain. Move too early, you might not have enough evidence for a solid prosecution. Move too late, and the drugs are already distributed across the country, causing harm in dozens of communities. As April began, the team received critical new intelligence. Their sources indicated that a major shipment was expected to move through Birmingham in the coming days. The exact timing and location remained unclear, but the pieces were starting to come together. The stage was set for what would become one of the most significant drug seizures in Birmingham's history. No one, not even the experienced officers of ROCU, could have predicted just how massive this operation would turn out to be. The investigation that led to the historic drug seizure on Allman Road began months earlier with nothing more than scraps of information and hunches from experienced officers. In November 2023, analysts at the National Crime Agency had flagged unusual patterns in cocaine distribution across central England. Street prices in certain areas had dropped, while purity levels had increased, a classic market signal that more product was flowing into the region. Something had changed in the supply chain. Detective Sergeant Oliver Townsend, a veteran drug investigator with ROCU, began pulling on threads. We started mapping unusual incidents, certain arrests, specific types of violence, patterns in street dealing. When you do this long enough, you start to see the shadows of larger operations behind the everyday drug activity. Townsend and his team began building a complex intelligence picture. They collected information from patrol officers, community reports, prison intelligence, and confidential informants. They analyzed phone data, vehicle movements, and financial transactions. Gradually, shapes began to emerge from the chaos. By January 2024, they had identified several key vehicles that appeared repeatedly in their intelligence. A white Peugeot partner van had been spotted at locations across the West Midlands, London, and the South East. The vehicle changed registration plates frequently, but subtle identifying marks and traffic camera analysis confirmed it was the same vehicle. Similarly, a silver Honda CR-V had appeared in their intelligence multiple times. The vehicle was registered to a leasing company and had been hired using identity documents later determined to be fraudulent. These vehicles were being used very carefully, explained Townsend. Never for the actual drug runs. They were meeting vehicles used for the handover points only. The actual transportation was happening in other vehicles we had not yet identified. The team established surveillance on these vehicles when possible, but the suspects were cautious. They would park in residential areas, switch to other vehicles, and use counter-surveillance techniques that suggested professional criminal training. In February, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A routine traffic stop in East Sussex led to the arrest of a low-level drug courier carrying 500 grams of high-purity cocaine. Under questioning, the courier provided limited but valuable information about his suppliers, mentioning a man from East Sussex who coordinated deliveries using different vehicles and drivers. This information aligned with intelligence already gathered about the operation. The team now had a potential name: Benjamin Holt, 43, from Horham in East Sussex. Holt had a limited criminal record, a conviction for cannabis possession from his 20s, and a driving offence several years ago. On paper, he appeared relatively unremarkable. That is often the case with the more sophisticated operators, said Detective Inspector Rafferty. They maintain a low profile. They do not have extensive criminal records because they have never been caught. They are careful, methodical, and professional. Financial investigation revealed more interesting details. Holt officially worked as a freelance logistics consultant, but his legitimate income did not explain his lifestyle. He owned a 4-bedroom house in an expensive area, drove luxury vehicles, and took frequent international vacations, classic signs of unexplained wealth. As March began, the investigation expanded. Surveillance teams observed Holt meeting with another man in a London pub. This individual was later identified as Adam Vorster, 41, who had no fixed address but moved between various short-term rentals across London and Birmingham. Vorster presented a different profile. He had several previous convictions for drug offences and had served a 4-year prison sentence for cocaine distribution in 2015. Since his release, he had maintained a low profile but appeared to have connections throughout the criminal underworld. Vorster was what we call a connector, explained Sergeant Walsh. He knew people across different networks. He could bring buyers and sellers together. He understood the market and had the trust of serious players. The third key figure emerged in late March: surveillance teams observed Vorster meeting with a younger man at a service station near Heathrow Airport. This individual was identified as Mohammed Mahmoud, 29, from West Drayton in Greater London. Mahmoud had arrived in the United Kingdom as a teenager and had built a small legitimate business importing textiles. However, intelligence suggested he had contacts with international drug networks and used his import business as cover for other activities. Mahmoud was interesting because he had the international connections, said Townsend. His business gave him legitimate reasons to be in contact with people in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Spain, all major entry points for cocaine into Europe. The investigation now had 3 key targets, but still lacked concrete evidence of drug trafficking. The team needed to catch them in possession of drugs to secure convictions. Throughout March, the surveillance continued. The suspects maintained their careful approach, meeting briefly in public places, switching vehicles regularly, and using minimal electronic communications. They displayed all the hallmarks of a sophisticated criminal operation. "We were dealing with patient professionals," recalled Rafferty. "They were not rushing transactions or taking unnecessary risks. They were methodical and security conscious. That made our job much harder, but also confirmed we were targeting the right people." By early April, intelligence indicated that a major shipment was imminent. Holt had traveled to Birmingham and was staying at a hotel near the airport. Vorster had been observed checking various locations around the city, possibly scouting for meeting points. Mahmoud had made a quick trip to Amsterdam and returned to London. All signs pointed to an imminent transaction. The surveillance operation intensified. Teams were deployed across Birmingham, monitoring key locations and vehicles. The white Peugeot van had been spotted again, now with new registration plates. The silver Honda CR-V was also in the city. On April 9th, the team received critical intelligence. A confidential source reported that a significant quantity of cocaine had entered the country through a container ship docking at Felixstowe. The shipment had been moved to a warehouse in London before being broken down into smaller loads for distribution. "That was when we knew something big was about to happen," said Rafferty. "All our intelligence was pointing to a major movement of product. We needed to be ready to move at a moment's notice." The team prepared for a potential operation. Surveillance teams were briefed and positioned across Birmingham. Arrest teams were placed on standby. The necessary legal authorizations were secured. Everything was in place. The morning of April 10th arrived with no unusual activity. Holt remained at his hotel. Vorster was observed having breakfast at a cafe in central Birmingham. Mahmoud had not yet been spotted in the city. Then, shortly after midday, the white Peugeot van was observed entering Birmingham from the direction of London. Traffic cameras confirmed Mahmoud was driving. The operation was now live. Dawn broke over Birmingham on April 10th with a light drizzle and overcast skies, perfect conditions for surveillance operations. Detective Sergeant Miranda Powell, who would coordinate the day's surveillance teams, arrived at the operations room at 5:30 in the morning to prepare. "Weather like that is a gift in our line of work," Powell would later explain. "It gives our teams natural cover. People have their heads down, umbrellas up. No one pays attention to a person sitting in a parked car or standing at a bus stop a little longer than normal." The operations room hummed with focused energy as team members arrived. Maps of Birmingham covered the walls, with key locations marked. Photos of the 3 targets, Holt, Vorster, and Mahmoud, were prominently displayed, along with images of their known vehicles. Powell briefed the 12 officers who would form the surveillance network across the city. "We are looking for a potential high-value drug transaction today. Intelligence suggests it will happen somewhere in the north or east of the city. Our 3 targets are likely to converge at some point. Remember, observation only. We need solid evidence before any intervention." The officers were divided into 5 mobile teams, each with specific sectors to cover. 2 officers were assigned to monitor Holt's hotel near the airport. Another team would track Vorster, who had spent the night at a rented apartment in the jewellery quarter. The remaining teams would position themselves at strategic locations across North and East Birmingham, ready to respond to sightings of the targets or their vehicles. By 7:30, all teams were in position. The waiting game began. At 8:15, the first movement occurred. Holt emerged from his hotel, carrying a small overnight bag. He walked to the car park and entered a silver Honda CR-V. The vehicle had been hired 3 days earlier from a rental company at Birmingham Airport. "Target 1 is mobile," reported the surveillance officer, using the operational code name for Holt. heading north on the A452. Powell acknowledged and alerted the other teams. The operation was now active. At 9:20, Vorster left his apartment and walked to a nearby cafe. He spent 45 minutes inside, appearing to make several phone calls. He paid in cash and left, walking toward the city center with no apparent destination. Target 2 is on foot, heading east on Colmore Row, came the report. Appears to be window shopping, no contact with other subjects. Meanwhile, there had been no sign of Mahmoud or the white Peugeot van. Intelligence had suggested he would be traveling from London, so Powell positioned a team near the M6 entry points to the city. The morning passed with routine movements. Holt drove to a shopping center, spent 30 minutes inside, and returned to his vehicle. Vorster continued walking around the city center, occasionally stopping at shops but making no significant contacts. There was still no sign of Mahmoud. This is typical of surveillance operations, Powell noted. Hours of nothing, followed by critical moments that happen in seconds. The challenge is maintaining focus during the quiet periods. At 12:35, the breakthrough came. A traffic camera identified the white Peugeot van entering Birmingham via the M6. The vehicle was now using registration plates different from those previously recorded, but the van itself was identifiable by a small dent on the rear bumper. Possible target 3 vehicle spotted at junction 6, reported the analyst monitoring the camera feeds. White Peugeot partner van, new plates, but matching our target vehicle. Powell immediately redirected 2 surveillance teams toward the northeast of the city, anticipating the van's route. All units be advised. Target 3 is likely entering our operational area. Maintain distance but confirm identity if possible. At 12:52, one of the surveillance teams visually confirmed the van traveling east on the Tyburn Road. The driver matched Mahmoud's description. Visual confirmation on target 3, came the report. Single occupant, matches subject description, currently heading toward Erdington. Powell felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with operations approaching critical phases. 3 subjects, previously connected only through intelligence, were now all in Birmingham at the same time. Something was about to happen. At 1:10, Holt's Honda was observed turning onto Gravelly Hill, heading toward Erdington. 7 minutes later, Vorster was spotted exiting a taxi on High Street in Erdington. The 3 targets were now all within a 2-kilometer radius of each other. All units maintain positions, Powell instructed. Do not close distance unless directed. We need to identify the meeting point without alerting the subjects. At 1:23, Holt's Honda was observed turning onto Slade Road. 3 minutes later, the white Peugeot van turned onto the same road, traveling in the same direction. We have 2 targets on the same road, Powell noted, her voice calm despite the building tension. Possible convergence imminent. Detective Inspector Rafferty had now joined the operations room, observing the unfolding situation. Are the arrest teams ready? 2 teams on standby, 5 minutes response time, Powell confirmed, but we need to see actual evidence of criminal activity before we move in. At 1:31, both vehicles turned onto Alman Road, a quiet residential street lined with terraced houses and parked cars, perfect for an inconspicuous meeting. Both vehicles now on Alman Road, reported the surveillance officer. The Honda has parked at the junction with Holly Lane. The van is approaching slowly. Powell zoomed in the operations room map to show the exact location. All units, likely meeting point identified. Units 3 and 4 maintain visual from safe distance. Be prepared for rapid developments. Through the camera of a surveillance vehicle parked 50 meters away, the team watched as the white van pulled up behind the Honda. Mahmoud exited the van and approached the Honda, where Vorster was now standing beside the passenger door. Holt remained in the driver's seat. Subjects 2 and 3 in contact, came the report. Conversing beside the Honda, target 1 remains in vehicle. Powell and Rafferty watched intently as Mahmoud returned to the van, opened the rear doors, and removed a black hold-all bag. The bag appeared heavy as he carried it back to the Honda. Vorster opened the boot, and Mahmoud placed the bag inside. We have a transfer, Rafferty stated. That is enough for us to move in. Authorize the arrest teams now. Powell immediately gave the order. All units. Evidence of transaction observed. Authorization for arrest phase granted. Arrest teams move in now. Surveillance units maintain positions and provide updates. Within 30 seconds, 2 unmarked police vehicles carrying arrest teams were speeding toward Alman Road. The critical phase of the operation was now underway. 1:33 on the afternoon of April 10th, 2024, a moment frozen in time for all involved. On Ullman Road, at the junction with Holly Lane, the three men were completing what they believed was a routine transaction, another successful handover in their profitable cocaine distribution operation. None of them realized they were being watched, or that their freedom was about to end. Detective Constable Ryan Kowalski was part of the lead arrest team racing toward the scene. "We were approximately 2 minutes away when we got the green light," he recalled. "The adrenaline kicks in, but training takes over. We had rehearsed this type of intervention dozens of times." Kowalski's team was in an unmarked black Ford Transit van, modified for police operations. Inside were 5 officers from the Tactical Support Unit, all wearing protective vests and carrying standard police equipment. They had been briefed that the suspects were not known to be armed, but in the world of high-value drug transactions, nothing could be taken for granted. The second arrest team, in a similar unmarked vehicle, would approach from the opposite direction, creating a pincer movement that would block any potential escape routes. "Our approach was all about speed and surprise," explained Kowalski. "In situations like this, the first 5 seconds determine everything. If the suspects have time to react, evidence can be destroyed, vehicles can be used as weapons, people can flee on foot. We needed to take control instantly." As the arrest team sped toward Ullman Road, the surveillance officers continued to provide updates. Subjects still at the vehicles. Target 3 appears to be returning to the van. Possible second bag being retrieved. This information heightened the urgency. If Mahmoud was transferring multiple bags between vehicles, the quantity of drugs involved could be substantial. At the operations room, Detective Inspector Rafferty watched the situation unfold through the live feed from surveillance cameras. The timing had to be perfect, he later reflected. Too early, and we might not have enough evidence to secure convictions. Too late, and the drugs could be moved again, dispersed to multiple locations across the city. On Ullman Road, the 3 men remained oblivious to the approaching danger. Mahmoud had indeed returned to the van, and appeared to be preparing to transfer another bag. Vorster stood beside the Honda, casually checking the street in both directions, a standard counter-surveillance technique, but far too late to be effective. Holt remained in the driver's seat, engine running, ready for a quick departure once the transfer was complete. The arrest teams were now 30 seconds away. "All units prepare for intervention," came the command from Powell. "Priority is to secure the suspects and vehicles, prevent any disposal of evidence." Kowalski's team turned onto Ullman Road first, accelerating hard toward the parked vehicles. Simultaneously, the second team approached from Holly Lane. The first indication the suspects had that something was wrong came from the sound of squealing tires and revving engines. Heads turned, eyes widened. The realization hit all 3 men at once. "You could see the moment they knew," Kowalski recalled. That split second of recognition, followed by panic. Vorster immediately tried to run. Mahmoud froze completely. Holt attempted to drive away but had nowhere to go. The transit van screeched to a halt, blocking the Honda's escape path. The second police vehicle boxed in the Peugeot van from behind. Within seconds, officers were pouring out of both vehicles, shouting the authorized police challenge. "Armed police, stay where you are, show me your hands." Though the officers were not actually armed, the standard challenge was designed to achieve immediate compliance through psychological impact. It worked. Vorster, who had taken 3 steps in an attempt to flee, immediately stopped and raised his hands. Mahmoud remained motionless beside the van, his hands already visible. Holt was ordered out of the Honda and complied without resistance. "All 3 detained without incident," came the report back to the operations room. "Scene secured. Ready for search phase." Detective Inspector Rafferty allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The months of intelligence work, surveillance and planning had culminated in this perfectly executed arrest. But the operation was far from over. Now came the critical search phase that would determine exactly what they had intercepted. Detective Sergeant Townsend arrived on scene 5 minutes after the arrests to lead the search team. All 3 suspects had been handcuffed and placed in separate police vehicles, each with an officer to prevent communication between them. "We started with the black holdall that had just been transferred to the Honda," Townsend explained. "As soon as I opened it, I knew we had something extraordinary. Inside the bag were 21 neatly wrapped blocks, each approximately 1 kilogram in weight. The packages were professionally sealed in waterproof wrapping with embossed logos, a common practice among high-level cocaine suppliers to brand their product. The packaging alone told us this was not street-level material," noted Townsend. This was high-purity cocaine directly from international suppliers, not yet cut with adulterants for street distribution. A preliminary field test confirmed the substance was cocaine. 21 kilograms of high-purity cocaine represented a street value of approximately £2.1 million, already a significant seizure by any standard. But the discovery in the Honda was just the beginning. After finding the first hold-all, we turned our attention to the van. Townsend continued. The rear cargo area initially appeared empty, except for some moving blankets and packing materials. But these people rarely make things obvious. The search team conducted a methodical examination of the van. Behind the driver's seat, they discovered a concealed compartment built into the floor, a professional modification not visible to casual inspection. Inside were 3 more hold-all bags identical to the first. When we found those additional bags, we knew this was going to be one for the record books, said Townsend. Each bag contained similar kilogram blocks of cocaine, professionally packaged and sealed. The 3 additional bags contained 62 more kilograms of cocaine. Further searching revealed a hidden compartment in the roof lining, containing 2 smaller bags with 19 more kilogram blocks. In total, the van contained 81 kilograms of cocaine, with an estimated street value of £8.1 million. Combined with the 21 kilograms in the first bag, the total seizure amounted to 102 kilograms of cocaine, with a potential street value of £10.2 million. I have been doing this job for 17 years, Townsend said. I have never seen a seizure this large from a single operation. When I called it into the operations room, there was silence on the other end of the line. People could not believe the numbers I was reporting. Back at the operations room, Detective Inspector Rafferty received the information with astonishment. We knew we were targeting a significant operation, but the quantity exceeded even our highest estimates. This was not just another drug bust. This was the dismantling of a major international supply line. The search teams also recovered 3 mobile phones, approximately £5,000 in cash, and various documents including rental agreements for storage units that would later be searched. By 3:15, just 1 hour and 45 minutes after the initial observation of the meeting on Alman Road, one of the largest drug seizures in West Midlands police history was complete. The 3 suspects had been arrested and transported to custody. The vehicles and drugs had been secured and were being transported to police facilities for forensic examination. The speed and efficiency of the operation had been remarkable. From the first observation of suspicious activity to the seizure of more than £10 million worth of cocaine, less than 2 hours had elapsed. That is how these operations need to work, reflected Rafferty. Quick observation, decisive action, thorough searches, no hesitation, no mistakes. The officers executed the plan perfectly. As news of the seizure spread through police channels, the scale of what had been achieved began to sink in. This was not merely the arrest of 3 drug dealers. This was the dismantling of a sophisticated cocaine importation and distribution network that had been supplying multiple regions across the United Kingdom. The real work, building the case for prosecution, was just beginning, but the critical first step had been accomplished with remarkable efficiency. As the enormity of the drug seizure became clear, a specialized team was assembled to process and document the evidence. The cocaine, all 102 kilograms, was transported under heavy security to a police facility equipped for handling large quantities of controlled substances. Detective Sergeant Amara Patel, a forensic drug expert with 15 years of experience, was called in to oversee the testing and analysis of the seizure. When I received the call about the quantity involved, I thought there had been a miscommunication, Patel recalled. Seizures of this magnitude are extremely rare in regional operations. This was the kind of quantity you might expect from a major port interception, not a street-level handover. The processing facility hummed with activity as the packages were carefully catalogued, photographed, and prepared for testing. Each kilogram block was assigned an evidence number and sealed in tamper-proof bags. The methodical process would take most of the night. What immediately stood out was the consistency and professionalism of the packaging, noted Patel. Each block was wrapped in multiple layers of plastic, vacuum-sealed, and marked with a distinctive logo, a crown with 3 points. This indicated a specific supplier, likely operating at international level. Initial testing of samples from various packages confirmed high-purity cocaine, estimated between 70 and 80% purity. Street-level cocaine in the United Kingdom typically ranges from 10 to 40% purity, with the remainder consisting of cutting agents like benzocaine or levamisole. This was pharmaceutical-grade cocaine that had not yet been cut for street distribution, explained Patel. At this purity level, it would typically be diluted by a factor of 3 or 4 before reaching end users, which explains the enormous street value. The wholesale value of the seizure, what the drugs would be worth when sold to mid-level distributors, was estimated between £2.3 and £3.5 million. But once cut and distributed at street level, the value could reach or exceed £10.2 million. The economic impact of removing this quantity from circulation is substantial, said Detective Inspector Rafferty, but the human impact is even greater. This represents thousands of individual doses that will not reach communities, will not fuel addiction, will not finance further criminal activity. As the evidence processing continued, detectives interviewed the 3 suspects at separate police stations across the West Midlands. All 3 initially provided no-comment responses, a common approach in serious criminal cases, usually on legal advice. The vehicles were subjected to forensic examination, revealing further evidence of organized criminal activity. The Honda contained a sophisticated hidden compartment in the trunk, accessible only by pressing a specific combination of controls in the correct sequence. The Peugeot van had been extensively modified with reinforced suspension to handle heavy loads and multiple hidden storage areas. These were purpose-built drug transportation vehicles, noted the forensic vehicle examiner. The modifications were professional grade, not amateur attempts. Someone had invested significant resources in creating these concealment systems. DNA and fingerprint evidence was collected from the vehicles and drug packaging. The results would later prove crucial in linking all 3 suspects directly to the cocaine, countering any potential defense claims of unwitting involvement. Back at ROCU headquarters, analysts began examining the phones recovered during the arrests. While the suspects had used minimal electronic communications, the devices still contained valuable information. Location data placed all 3 men at various meeting points across the country in the weeks leading up to their arrests. Contact lists included numbers linked to known drug traffickers in the Netherlands, Spain, and Colombia. The phones provided the international dimension to the case, explained the technical analyst. We could see connections to source countries and distribution networks across Europe. This was not an isolated operation, but part of a sophisticated international supply chain. Perhaps most significantly, the search of storage units identified in documents found during the arrests yielded additional evidence. A unit in East London, rented under a false name linked to Mahmoud, contained packaging materials identical to those used for the cocaine, digital scales, and a hydraulic press used for recompressing cocaine after cutting. Another storage unit near Birmingham, linked to Worcester, contained £50,000 in cash hidden inside a speaker system, along with multiple prepaid mobile phones and fake identification documents. The storage units provided the infrastructure evidence, said Detective Sergeant Townsend. This showed an ongoing operation with established processes for handling, repackaging, and distributing cocaine on a commercial scale. As the first 24 hours after the arrests concluded, the scale and significance of the operation became increasingly clear. This was not a one-off transaction, but the interception of a major supply line that had likely been operating for months or years. Analysis of the seized cocaine revealed another crucial detail. Testing of the logo stamped into the packaging identified it as matching cocaine seized in other European countries, including a 30-kilogram seizure in Rotterdam 2 months earlier and a 60-kilogram seizure in Antwerp the previous year. The matching logos confirmed what we suspected, said Patel. This was part of a major international trafficking operation. The same source was supplying multiple European countries through different distribution networks. The financial investigation team began tracing money movements associated with the 3 suspects. While they had been careful to avoid traditional banking systems, preferring cash transactions, some patterns emerged. Mahmoud had made multiple trips to Dubai in the previous year, a known hub for drug money laundering. Holt had purchased property in Spain through complex corporate structures designed to obscure ownership. Following the money is often as important as following the drugs, explained the financial investigator. These networks generate enormous profits that need to be laundered and invested. Disrupting the financial side can be as effective as intercepting the drugs themselves. By the second day after the arrests, the full picture of what had been disrupted began to emerge. The £10 million cocaine seizure was not just a statistical success, but the dismantling of a sophisticated operation that had been feeding addiction and fueling violence across multiple communities. What made this case particularly significant was the purity and quantity, reflected Detective Inspector Rafferty. This was not cocaine that had passed through multiple hands, being cut at each stage. This was direct from source to UK distribution, indicating our suspects had connections at the highest levels of international trafficking. The discovery phase of the investigation continued for weeks, with each new finding adding to the strength of the case against the three men. International inquiries through Europol and Interpol identified connections to known trafficking groups in South America and Europe. The significance of the operation extended beyond the immediate arrests and seizures. Intelligence gathered would inform investigations into other networks, potentially leading to further disruption of the cocaine supply chain across Europe. For the communities affected by drug trafficking and its associated harms, the impact was substantial. Removing such a large quantity of cocaine from circulation would disrupt supply chains, potentially raising prices and reducing availability, creating opportunities for addiction intervention services to reach users. As Detective Sergeant Patel completed her analysis of the seized drugs, she reflected on the broader significance. In my career, I have tested thousands of drug samples, each representing human suffering and criminal profit, but rarely have I seen a single seizure that could have such wide-ranging impact. The quantity and purity of this cocaine made it a truly exceptional case. The discovery phase had transformed what began as surveillance of suspicious activity into one of the most significant drug trafficking cases in recent UK history. The evidence gathered would prove crucial in securing convictions and dismantling a major criminal network. As the investigation progressed, a clearer picture emerged of the three men caught in the dramatic April 10th operation and their roles in the cocaine distribution network. Benjamin Holt, at 43, was the oldest of the three and appeared to be the coordinator of UK distribution operations. Born and raised in Brighton, Holt had begun his working life legitimately, training as an accountant and working for several small firms in southern England. His entry into criminal activity came in his early 30s, following financial difficulties after a divorce. Police believed he began by laundering money for local drug dealers, using his accounting knowledge to hide illegal proceeds. Over time, he established connections with larger criminal networks and moved into drug distribution. Holt represented a type we increasingly see in major drug operations, explained Detective Inspector Rafferty. Individuals with legitimate business backgrounds who bring professional skills to criminal enterprises. They approach drug trafficking as a business, applying commercial principles to maximize profit and minimize risk. Holt maintained a facade of legitimacy through a logistics consultancy company that existed primarily on paper. This provided cover for his frequent travel across the United Kingdom and to European destinations including Spain, the Netherlands and Belgium, all significant entry points for cocaine into Europe. His home in Horham, East Sussex, was a comfortable four-bedroom house valued at approximately £600,000. He drove a range of vehicles, all registered to his company, and took regular holidays to luxury destinations. None of this lifestyle was explainable through legitimate income. What made Holt valuable to the network was his understanding of logistics and distribution, noted Rafferty. He could organize transportation, storage, and delivery systems that minimized detection risk. He knew how to manage a supply chain. Despite his central role, Holt had no previous convictions for drug offenses, only minor matters from his youth and a driving infraction. His ability to avoid detection for so long spoke to his careful approach and understanding of police tactics. Adam Vorster presented a different profile. At 41, he had a more traditional criminal background, with previous convictions for drug offenses and a prison sentence served between 2011 and 2015 for cocaine distribution. Born in Liverpool to South African parents, Vorster had grown up in various locations across England as his family moved frequently. He left school at 16 with few qualifications and drifted into criminal activity in his late teens. Vorster was what we call a connector, explained Detective Sergeant Townsend. His value to the network came from his extensive contacts across different criminal groups. He knew who wanted to buy, who wanted to sell, and how to bring them together safely. Unlike Holt, Vorster maintained no fixed address, instead moving between short-term accommodations across London, Birmingham, and Manchester. He owned no property and kept few possessions, making him difficult to track through conventional means. Financial investigation revealed he operated almost exclusively in cash, with no bank accounts in his name. Despite this apparent lack of assets, he maintained an expensive lifestyle, wearing designer clothes and staying in high-end apartments. People like Vorster are essentially brokers in the drug trade, said Townsend. They take a percentage of each deal they facilitate without ever owning the drugs themselves. This creates distance from the physical product while still generating substantial income. Intelligence gathered during the investigation suggested Vorster had connections to criminal groups across the United Kingdom, including established networks in Liverpool, Manchester, and London. He was known for his ability to resolve conflicts between different criminal factions, a valuable skill in the volatile drug trade. The third suspect, Mahmoud, represented the international dimension of the operation. At 29, he was the youngest of the three, but played a crucial role in connecting the UK distribution network to overseas suppliers. Born in Somalia, Mahmoud had come to the United Kingdom as a teenager with his family, settling in West London. He had established a small import-export business dealing in textiles, which provided legitimate cover for international travel and contacts. Mahmoud's business gave him reasons to be in regular contact with people in countries that are transit points for cocaine, explained the financial investigator. He could meet with suppliers in the Netherlands or Spain under the guise of legitimate business meetings. While his company did conduct some genuine trade, financial analysis showed the business could not support his lifestyle. He owned a 3-bedroom apartment in West Drayton valued at £450,000 and drove a £70,000 Mercedes, despite his company showing only modest profits. The textile business was classic cover, noted Rafferty. Import-export companies are frequently used by drug traffickers because they provide legitimate reasons for international shipments, currency exchange, and cross-border relationships. Mahmoud had no previous convictions in the United Kingdom, though intelligence suggested he had been involved in drug distribution for at least 5 years. His value to the network came from his international connections and his ability to coordinate shipments into the country. Together, the three men represented different but complementary aspects of modern drug trafficking operations: international supply connections, brokerage across different criminal networks, and professional logistics management. What made this network particularly effective was the combination of skills and connections, reflected Detective Inspector Rafferty. They had international supply lines through Mahmoud, distribution expertise through Holt, and market access through Vorster. Together they could move cocaine from South American production to UK street level with remarkable efficiency. The investigation revealed that the three had likely been working together for approximately 18 months. During that time, intelligence suggested they had moved hundreds of kilograms of cocaine through their network, generating millions of pounds in profit. Their operational security had been sophisticated. They used multiple vehicles, changed phones regularly, conducted counter-surveillance checks, and kept their meetings brief and in public locations. They operated on a need-to-know basis, with each member having limited knowledge of the wider network. These were not opportunistic criminals, emphasized Rafferty. They ran their operation like a business, with defined roles, security protocols, quality control, and financial management. That level of organization makes them particularly dangerous, but also creates documentary evidence that strengthens our case. As the prosecution case was built, the full extent of each suspect's involvement became clearer. Cell site analysis placed all three men at multiple meeting locations across the country in the months leading up to their arrests. Financial investigation identified patterns of cash deposits and expenditure that coincided with suspected drug movements. Perhaps most damaging to potential defenses was the forensic evidence. Fingerprints and DNA from all three suspects were found on the drug packaging and inside the hidden compartments of the vehicles. This directly linked them to the cocaine and undermined any claims of unwitting involvement. The physical evidence was compelling, said Townsend. We had their fingerprints on the drugs, their DNA in the vehicles, their phones showing relevant movements, and their unexplained wealth. The case against them was overwhelming. When presented with this evidence during formal interviews, all three suspects maintained their right to silence, providing no explanations or alternative narratives. This is a common approach in serious drug cases where defense strategies are typically reserved for court proceedings. As the case progressed toward trial, investigators continued building the wider picture of the network's operations. International inquiries identified connections to established trafficking groups in Colombia, the Netherlands, and Spain. The investigation had disrupted not just three individuals, but a significant supply chain feeding cocaine into communities across the United Kingdom. The personal stories of Holt, Vorster, and Mahmoud illustrated different pathways into serious organized crime, From financial pressure and opportunism to calculated business decisions, together they formed a sophisticated operation that had caused immense harm before being dismantled by the April 10th operation. Understanding the individuals involved helps us identify and target similar networks, concluded Rafferty. Each arrest teaches us about how these operations function and evolve. This case provided valuable intelligence that will inform our approach to disrupting drug trafficking networks for years to come. In the days and weeks following the April 10th arrests, the full machinery of the criminal justice system engaged with what had become one of the most significant drug cases in recent West Midlands history. The three suspects, Holt, Vorster, and Mahamud, were formally charged with conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, a serious offence carrying a potential maximum sentence of life imprisonment. All three were remanded in custody due to the severity of the charges and the risk of flight. Behind the scenes, a dedicated team of detectives, analysts, and specialists worked to build the prosecution case. This painstaking process involved everything from detailed forensic analysis. The initial arrests and drug seizure were just the beginning, explained Crown Prosecutor Victoria Nolan, who would lead the case in court. Building a case that will secure convictions requires meticulous attention to detail and absolute adherence to procedural requirements. Especially with high-value cases like this, we anticipate sophisticated legal challenges. The prosecution file grew to thousands of pages, encompassing witness statements, forensic reports, telephone analysis, financial investigation, and surveillance logs. Each piece of evidence needed to be properly documented and disclosed to defense teams. The cocaine itself presented significant logistical challenges. As a high-value controlled substance, it required secure storage and regular auditing. Samples were sent to independent laboratories for verification of the police testing results, confirming both the nature of the substance and its exceptional purity. The quantity involved created practical issues we do not often face, noted the evidence manager. We needed specialized secure storage and handling protocols. The street value made it a target, so security was paramount throughout the process. International inquiries yielded additional evidence about the broader network. Through Europol, investigators established links between the seized cocaine and previous shipments intercepted in the Netherlands and Belgium. The distinctive packaging logos matched those found in other European seizures, confirming connections to South American cartels. Financial investigation continued to uncover the money trails. While the suspects had been careful to avoid traditional banking systems, detailed examination of their finances revealed patterns consistent with large-scale drug trafficking. Following the money often reveals connections that physical surveillance cannot, explained the financial investigator. We identified property purchases in Spain, high-value vehicles bought with cash, and lifestyle expenditure that could not be explained through legitimate income. As the investigation progressed, the impact of the operation rippled through criminal networks. Intelligence sources reported significant disruption to cocaine supply in several regions of the United Kingdom. Prices temporarily increased, and purity levels dropped as distributors scrambled to find alternative suppliers. When you remove 100 kilograms from the supply chain, it creates a vacuum, noted Detective Inspector Rafferty. Other suppliers try to fill that gap, often leading to conflicts and further intelligence opportunities for law enforcement. The operation also generated valuable intelligence about other criminal networks. Phones seized during the arrests contained contacts linked to other trafficking groups. Storage locations identified during searches were connected to additional suspects. This intelligence fed into new investigations, creating a multiplier effect from the original operation. Major drug seizures often lead to a cascade of additional intelligence, explained Rafferty. As we pull on one thread, the wider tapestry of criminal connections begins to unravel. This single operation has already generated leads for 3 separate investigations into other networks. For the officers involved in the April 10th operation, the aftermath brought professional recognition. The textbook execution of the surveillance and arrests was highlighted as an example of best practice within the force. Several officers received commendations for their roles in the operation. Detective Sergeant Powell, who had coordinated the surveillance teams, reflected on the operation's success. Everything aligned perfectly that day. The intelligence was accurate, the suspects followed predicted patterns, and the arrest teams executed their roles flawlessly. These cases often involve an element of luck, but this one was primarily about thorough preparation and professional execution. As the case moved toward trial, scheduled for October 2024, prosecutors anticipated defense strategies and prepared accordingly. The overwhelming physical evidence linking the suspects to the drugs left limited options for their legal teams. In cases with such strong physical evidence, defense strategies typically focus on procedural challenges or attempting to minimize the defendant's role, explained Prosecutor Nolan. They might claim their client was merely a courier unaware of the contents or challenge the legality of the surveillance operation. To counter these potential defenses, the prosecution team ensured all surveillance authorizations were properly documented and that the chain of evidence was impeccable. They also built detailed profiles of each defendant's role in the conspiracy, supported by communications data, financial evidence, and physical forensics. The wider community impact of the operation became apparent in the months following the arrests. Local authorities in areas affected by the drug network reported temporary reductions in drug-related offenses as supply chains were disrupted. Support services noted an increase in people seeking help for cocaine addiction, possibly due to reduced availability or increased prices following the seizure. This unexpected public health benefit highlighted the connection between supply reduction and harm reduction. Major seizures create windows of opportunity for intervention services, noted a public health official. When drugs become less available or more expensive, some users take that moment to seek help. These operations have impacts beyond just criminal justice outcomes. For the investigators who had worked on the case for months, the aftermath brought a mixture of satisfaction and perspective. This was undoubtedly a significant success, reflected Detective Inspector Rafferty. Removing £10 million of cocaine from circulation will have prevented enormous harm. But we are realistic about the ongoing challenge. As long as demand exists, supply networks will adapt and evolve. The case against Holt, Vorster, and Mahamoud moved through the legal system during the summer and early autumn of 2024. Preliminary hearings established the parameters of the case, with defense teams testing various legal arguments without success. The strength of the evidence left the defendants with limited options. As the trial date approached, legal representatives for all three men indicated they were considering their positions regarding potential guilty pleas. By September, with the weight of evidence against them clear, discussions between prosecution and defense teams intensified. The prospect of lengthy prison sentences following conviction at trial encouraged consideration of early guilty pleas in exchange for slightly reduced sentences. On October 7, 2024, in a significant development, all three defendants indicated their intention to plead guilty to the conspiracy charges. This decision avoided the need for a full trial, while ensuring they would receive some credit for not putting the state to the expense of proving the case in court. The stage was now set for the final phase of the case, sentencing at Birmingham Crown Court in November. The three men who had operated one of the United Kingdom's top-end cocaine networks would finally face justice for their crimes. November 1, 2024, Birmingham Crown Court, the culmination of a case that began 7 months earlier with a surveillance operation on a quiet Birmingham street. The courtroom was filled with police officers involved in the case, legal representatives, journalists, and court officials. The three defendants, Holt, Vorster, and Mahamoud, sat in the dock, each accompanied by a security officer. Judge Anthony Richardson entered the courtroom, and proceedings began with the formal confirmation of guilty pleas from all three defendants to charges of conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. Prosecutor Victoria Nolan presented the facts of the case to the court. She detailed the surveillance operation, the arrests, and the extraordinary quantity of cocaine seized, 102 kilograms with a street value exceeding £10 million. This case represents drug trafficking at the highest commercial level, Nolan told the court. The quantity and purity indicate direct connections to international supply networks. This was not street-level dealing, but wholesale distribution that would have fed addiction and crime across multiple communities. The prosecutor outlined the role of each defendant, supported by evidence gathered during the months-long investigation. Holt was characterized as the logistics coordinator, Vorster as the network connector, and Mahamoud as the international supply link. Financial evidence was presented showing the scale of the operation and the profits generated. Property, vehicles, and luxury goods acquired through drug money were detailed, demonstrating how the proceeds of crime had funded lavish lifestyles for the defendants. The financial investigation revealed classic signs of high-level drug trafficking, Nolan explained. Cash purchases of luxury goods, property acquired through complex corporate structures, international money movements designed to disguise the criminal origin of funds. Defense attorneys then presented mitigation arguments for their clients. Holt's lawyer emphasized his previous good character and limited criminal record. Vorster's representative highlighted his difficult childhood and claimed he had been trying to move away from criminal activity. Mahmoud's attorneys stressed his young age and potential for rehabilitation. All three defense teams acknowledged the seriousness of the offenses, but argued for sentences at the lower end of the applicable range, citing the early guilty pleas as evidence of remorse. Judge Richardson listened carefully to both prosecution and defense submissions before delivering his sentencing remarks. His tone was measured but firm as he addressed the three defendants directly. Drug trafficking at this level causes incalculable harm to society, the judge stated. It fuels addiction, violence, exploitation, and the corruption of legitimate businesses and institutions. The quantity of cocaine involved in this case, 102 kilograms of high-purity cocaine worth over £10 million, places this offense in the highest category under sentencing guidelines. The judge acknowledged the early guilty pleas, but noted the overwhelming evidence against the defendants, suggesting the pleas were as much a recognition of inevitable conviction as genuine remorse. Benjamin Holt, your role as coordinator of distribution operations was central to this conspiracy. Your business background and logistics expertise were put to criminal use, maximizing profits from human misery. I sentence you to 13 years and 2 months imprisonment. Adam Vorster, your connections across criminal networks facilitated this conspiracy. Your previous conviction for similar offenses demonstrates a persistent commitment to drug trafficking despite having experienced the consequences. I sentence you to 9 years and 3 months imprisonment. Mahmoud, your international connections linked this operation to overseas suppliers. While you are younger than your co-defendants, your role was no less significant in enabling this conspiracy. I sentence you to 7 years and 6 months imprisonment. In total, the three men received nearly 30 years of imprisonment, a substantial sentence reflecting the seriousness of their crimes. Financial confiscation proceedings would follow to seize assets acquired through criminal activity. As the defendants were led from the dock to begin their sentences, Detective Inspector Rafferty observed from the public gallery. The sentencing marked the successful conclusion of an operation that had begun with fragments of intelligence and culminated in one of the largest cocaine seizures in the region's history. The sentences reflect the harm these men caused through their criminal enterprise. Rafferty commented after the hearing, but the real impact of this operation goes beyond the prison terms. We have dismantled a major supply network, seized drugs worth millions, and gathered intelligence that will inform our approach to similar networks. The wider impact of the operation continued to unfold in the weeks and months following the sentencing. The intelligence gathered had already contributed to additional arrests and drug seizures across the United Kingdom. International partnerships had been strengthened through the collaboration required to trace the cocaine supply chain. In communities previously supplied by the dismantled network, local authorities reported sustained disruption to cocaine availability, while other suppliers inevitably attempted to fill the gap. The removal of such a significant distribution channel created ongoing challenges for the drug market. Public health officials noted that drug treatment services had seen increased engagement in the months following the operation. The disruption to supply had created opportunities for intervention, with some users seeking help when their regular sources became unreliable or prices increased. Major enforcement operations like this create windows for treatment services, explained a public health specialist. When the market is disrupted, some users reassess their relationship with drugs. That moment of disruption can be the catalyst for positive change. For law enforcement, the operation provided valuable insights into the evolving methods of drug trafficking networks. The sophisticated counter-surveillance techniques, vehicle modifications, and financial arrangements observed in this case informed training and tactics for future operations. Criminal networks adapt and learn, so we must do the same, noted Rafferty. Each major case teaches us something new about how these operations function. The knowledge gained from this investigation is already informing our approach to targeting similar networks. The financial investigation continued long after the criminal sentencing, with proceedings underway to confiscate assets acquired through drug trafficking. Properties in Spain and the United Kingdom, luxury vehicles, and cash reserves were identified for potential seizure under proceeds of crime legislation. The prison sentences are just one component of the response, explained the financial investigator. Removing the profits of crime is equally important. Our goal is to ensure that when these individuals complete their sentences, they cannot return to lives funded by criminal wealth. For the officers directly involved in the April 10th operation, the successful conclusion brought professional satisfaction and recognition. The textbook execution of the surveillance, arrests, and evidence handling was highlighted as exemplary practice within regional law enforcement. Detective Sergeant Powell, who had coordinated the surveillance operation, reflected, "Days like April 10th are what you hope for in this line of work, when months of intelligence and planning come together perfectly, when you know you have removed something genuinely harmful from society. That is why we do this job." The £10 million drug bust represented not just the removal of cocaine from circulation, but the dismantling of a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had caused harm across multiple communities. The 30-year combined sentences served both as punishment for the 3 defendants and as deterrence to others involved in similar activities. As Detective Inspector Rafferty concluded in his final report on the operation, the successful prosecution of Holt, Vorster, and Mahamud demonstrates that no drug trafficking network, regardless of its sophistication or scale, is beyond the reach of law enforcement. This case shows the impact that can be achieved through patient intelligence work, precise operational execution, and thorough investigative follow-through. The quiet street in Erdington where the operation culminated had returned to normal, with residents unaware of the significant blow to organized crime that had occurred there. But across the criminal landscape, the message had been sent. Even the most sophisticated drug trafficking operations remain vulnerable to detection and dismantling by determined law enforcement. The arrest and conviction of Benjamin Holt, Adam Vorster, and Mahamud marked a significant milestone in the fight against organized crime in the United Kingdom. What began as routine surveillance on a residential Birmingham street resulted in one of the largest cocaine seizures in West Midlands police history, 102 kilograms with a street value exceeding £10 million. The case exemplified modern drug trafficking in both its sophistication and its vulnerabilities. The 3 defendants had operated a high-level distribution network with international connections, professional logistics, and careful security measures. Yet despite these precautions, patient police work and precise operational execution brought their criminal enterprise to an end. This case demonstrates both the challenge and the opportunity in tackling serious organized crime, reflected Detective Inspector Rafferty 6 months after the sentencing. These networks are becoming increasingly sophisticated, adopting business models and security protocols that make detection difficult. But they also leave evidence trails, financial, digital, physical, that allow us to build comprehensive cases when we identify them. The investigation highlighted the evolving nature of drug trafficking in the 21st century. Gone are the days when such operations were solely the domain of traditional criminal gangs. Today's networks often involve individuals with legitimate business backgrounds who apply professional expertise to criminal enterprises. Holt, with his accounting background and logistics knowledge, represented this new breed of drug trafficker, someone who approached cocaine distribution as a business operation requiring supply chain management, quality control, and financial planning. This professionalization of drug trafficking presents new challenges for law enforcement, but also creates new vulnerabilities that can be exploited. We are seeing more individuals with professional backgrounds entering drug trafficking, noted Rafferty. They bring skills from legitimate business that make operations more efficient and harder to detect. But they also leave different types of evidence, complex financial arrangements, corporate structures, digital footprints that provide new investigative opportunities. The case also demonstrated the international nature of modern cocaine trafficking. From production in South America to distribution across the United Kingdom, the supply chain crossed multiple countries and jurisdictions. The packaging logos linking the seized cocaine to previous European interdictions confirmed the global scale of the operation. This international dimension emphasized the importance of cross-border cooperation in tackling drug trafficking. Information shared through Europol and Interpol had contributed to the investigation, and intelligence from the Birmingham case fed back into international efforts to disrupt cocaine supply networks. No single police force or even country can address these networks in isolation, explained an international liaison officer involved in the case. The cocaine supply chain crosses continents. Effective response requires coordination from source countries through transit routes to final distribution points. This case demonstrated the value of that international cooperation. For the communities affected by drug trafficking, the impact of the operation extended beyond criminal justice outcomes. The removal of such a significant quantity of cocaine from circulation disrupted supply chains across multiple regions, creating temporary reductions in availability and increases in price. Public health officials noted that these market disruptions created opportunities for intervention with individuals struggling with addiction. Treatment services reported increased engagement in the months following the operation, as users found their regular supplies interrupted. There is a direct connection between supply reduction and harm reduction, explained a drug treatment specialist. When major enforcement operations disrupt the market, it creates moments where some users reconsider their relationship with drugs. These windows are valuable for treatment services. The financial investigation that followed the arrests highlighted the enormous profits generated by high-level drug trafficking. Property in multiple countries, luxury vehicles, expensive lifestyles, all funded through the distribution of a substance that causes immense harm to individuals and communities. Proceeds of crime proceedings continued to target these assets, ensuring that the consequences of the criminal enterprise extended beyond prison sentences to the financial benefits the defendants had accrued. Removing the profit motivation is crucial, noted the financial investigator. Prison sentences alone will not deter organized crime if the financial rewards remain available upon release. Our goal is to ensure that crime truly does not pay. For law enforcement, the successful operation provided valuable lessons for future investigations. The sophisticated counter-surveillance techniques employed by the defendants, their use of multiple vehicles and phones, and their careful meeting arrangements all informed tactical development for targeting similar networks. "We continuously learn and adapt," said Detective Sergeant Powell. "Each major case teaches us something about how these networks operate and how they try to avoid detection. We incorporate those lessons into our training and operational planning." The case also demonstrated the continuing value of traditional policing skills alongside modern technology. While digital intelligence and forensic science played important roles, the operation succeeded primarily because of careful surveillance, patient intelligence building, and the experienced judgment of officers who recognized the significance of what they were observing. Technology provides important tools, but the fundamental skills of observation, interpretation, and decisive action remain central to effective policing, reflected Powell. The officers who spotted the suspicious behavior on Almond Road and the team that executed the perfect arrest demonstrated those timeless policing qualities. For the wider criminal justice system, the case represented a comprehensive success, from initial intelligence through to final sentencing. The guilty pleas reflected the overwhelming strength of the evidence gathered, avoiding the need for a lengthy trial while still securing substantial prison sentences. Cases of this complexity demonstrate the criminal justice system working as it should, noted prosecutor Victoria Nolan. Legitimate surveillance, lawful arrests, properly handled evidence, and fair court proceedings resulting in appropriate sentences proportionate to the harm caused. As Erdington and other areas affected by the drug network continued their recovery, the impact of the April 10th operation remained evident. The enormous quantity of cocaine seized, 102 kilograms, represented thousands of individual doses that never reached users, never funded further criminal activity, and never contributed to the cycle of addiction and harm. For Detective Inspector Rafferty and his team, the case represented professional achievement but also a realistic understanding of the ongoing challenge. "We disrupted a significant criminal network and prevented substantial harm," Rafferty concluded. "But we do not pretend this single operation has solved the problem of cocaine trafficking. Other networks will attempt to fill the gap. Our commitment is to continue the patient, methodical work of identifying, targeting, and dismantling these operations, one at a time, for as long as necessary." The Birmingham drug bust stands as testimony to what can be achieved when intelligence, preparation, and operational excellence combine. In less than 2 hours on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had operated for months was dismantled. £10 million worth of cocaine was removed from circulation, and 3 major drug traffickers began their journey to justice. For communities across the United Kingdom, the impact of those decisive moments on Almond Road continues to resonate, in disrupted supply chains, in opportunities for treatment and recovery, and in the message sent to those who would profit from the misery of addiction. No matter how sophisticated the operation, the law will eventually catch up. If you found this case as remarkable as we did, make sure to subscribe to Criminal Mind Cortex for more incredible true crime stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about criminal investigations. The speed and precision with which Birmingham Police dismantled this massive drug operation shows the extraordinary work happening behind the scenes to keep our communities safe. This case demonstrates how modern policing combines traditional surveillance with cutting-edge intelligence work to take down even the most sophisticated criminal networks. From the patient gathering of evidence to the split-second decision to move in, every aspect of this operation showcases law enforcement at its finest. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest investigations into the most fascinating cases from around the world, where ordinary streets become the stage for extraordinary police work that changes communities forever.